This lecture focuses on metaphors, more specifically the power of metaphors, how they help us create visualizations and infographics. Here's a quote from Lakoff and Johnson from the book Metaphors We Live By. Quote, "Metaphor is not just a matter of language, that is, of mere words. We shall argue that, on the contrary, human thought processes are largely metaphorical." In it, they make in their book, they make sure that the idea that anything we learn is not so much the thing itself, especially something new. We compare that new thing to something we previously know, and then from that, it's based on metaphors. That's one of the major ways that people learn. For example, there's the metaphor that ideas are money. She has a wealth of ideas. So we think of an idea as being somehow useful and has monetary value. Again, she has a wealth of ideas. We sometimes think metaphorically in terms of love as a physical force. There were sparks between us. Again, there's not literally sparks between two people's hands as they touch for the first time. It's metaphorical in nature. Another metaphor is the idea of life being a container. I have had a full life. Your life, the container, is more useful, more good because this container has been full of a number of memories and things. Finally, speech is conflict. Argument is war. The way we can tell a normal discussion and a argument is that when you're arguing, you feel kind of warlike. Your blood pressure gets hot. Your face turns red. You talk heatedly. So again, it's like the idea that the metaphor is that argument, in this case, is war. Here's another quote from Lakoff and Johnson. Quote, "Our conventional ways of talking about arguments presuppose a metaphor we're hardly ever conscious of. Again, we argue, we feel strongly, and when we argue, it is like we're having a war with someone else, but we do it, we don't even think about that happening." I'll give you an example of this. It's a political example, so hopefully this won't turn anyone off. This is just an example. It's not taking a political side. What metaphor was used to describe, during the confirmation hearings, Brett Kavanaugh and William Barr were? Think about it. Has to do something with, if you can't think about it, it has something to do with food, heat, barbecuing. They were both grilled. As you see over here, Brett Kavanaugh will be grilled by the Senate Judiciary at the bottom right. When you see Barr, William Barr was grilled, as you see through the lower third, the graphic at the very bottom. And William Barr, being a smart guy, brings water to the grilling. So again, they weren't literally grilled, they were metaphorically grilled. And in this sense, people asked them pointed and direct and difficult questions, making them, again, grilled. Here's another quote from Lakoff and Johnson. "The essence of metaphor is understanding and experiencing one kind of thing in terms of another." Again, like I said before, about when you learn, you start your life with a fixed number of experiences, knowledge sets, and you want to build based on what someone knows and use things that they know of to help explain new phenomenon. This is especially important for abstract ideas or concepts. Because when you're faced with a abstract idea or concept, you don't necessarily know exactly what that thing is. So what you try to do is to make it more concrete through a gripping, strong metaphor. And I'll ask you this, and I'll give you the answer in just a moment. What is one of the most famous metaphors for environmentalism? You can pause if you want. You can pause the video if you want to think about it for a second. Okay, it is the idea of a carbon footprint. You see in the upper left, it's a bunch of green feet made out of leaves. Bottom left, the footprint is made out of the letters for carbon. And on the right, again, it's a green foot with various parts of the ecosystem, like water, emissions, etc., within it. That has been a really powerful way. When the environmental movement was trying to share these new ideas, people didn't know what environmentalism was. They didn't know how to sort of talk about it, so they said the idea of a carbon footprint. It's like the idea that we as human beings, we know about the idea of pressing down with our feet and it leaving an imprint. carbon footprint is an example of that. One of the problems with metaphors is that sometimes they transcend their original logic. For those of you who are into climate change, you can make the argument that the idea of a carbon footprint that you see previously are quite simple. They look kind of friendly. They're all like positive, nice green color. You can make the idea, or you could say that the metaphor has outlived its usefulness in the sense that if you see here, on the left is a snowshoe where a small foot would be on it, or you see the cleats on the right. It's the idea that right now we are in fact impacting our environment so much that the simple little footprints have given way to these. So I'm editorializing a bit, but hopefully you'll see that these metaphors can be really useful for informing. At some time they can actually outlive their usefulness. Here's another quote from Lakoff and Johnson. But our conceptual system is not something we're normally aware of. In most of the little things we do every day, we simply think and act more or less automatically along certain lines. I'm talking about the idea of framing our activities. For example, what's your path to work? So think about that for a second. When you think of your path to work, a lot of people, when they first start their first job, they have to think consciously about the way they get to their work. But after a couple of weeks, a couple of months, you have this sort of mental map formed, and you stop thinking about how you get to work. Like not every morning after working at a place for 5 years, you're like, oh, how do I get to work today? You have this sort of idea that you think and act more or less automatically upon. I'll give you another example of the idea that we think and act more or less automatically along certain lines. I'm going to show you an image. Which do you think is worth more, the one on the left or the right? I would say that the way these frames work, pretend that there's a same piece of art where the white is in the middle of both of these two frames, the one on the left and the one on the right. I think most people would say because it's more ornate, it looks golden, the frame on the left would have art within it that would be more expensive than the one on the right. The art itself would be exactly the same, and just pretend that the sizes are exactly the same for the white space in the middle. The frame of this is so powerful that we don't even think about the fact that, again, if you were just going to price something, you would just assume that a piece of artwork with the frame on the left, you think that's much more expensive than the one on the right because it's made out of wood. So again, it's something that we don't even think about. Finally, why is learning about metaphors and frames important? Really simply, by having a great metaphor, it can make abstract ideas or concepts understandable. And also, the second major point, strong infographics have strong metaphors. If you can think of a really powerful metaphor like carbon footprint, you can help communicate something really abstract really well so people understand it. Thanks a lot for listening to this lecture. Look forward to seeing you next time.